Welcome to Season 2 with the Market Mystics, where we discuss and redefine markets, wealth, and trading on Earth as it is in heaven. Join us on the journey while we consider new possibilities with special guests who might just challenge a few perspectives. Get ready to dive in deep with your hosts, Joshua and Kim.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Market Mystics. Josh, how are you today?
I'm doing great.
Good.
I woke up this morning. I feel good. I feel like I rested well. I'm motivated. I have 2 pages of a to-do list in front of me that needs to get knocked out in the next day or two. But I feel like motivated for it. It doesn't feel daunting for me. So that's good.
And I like a good checklist. I'll just be honest. I do. I know you're not surprised by that.
It can be helpful for sure.
It can be. So today we wanted to talk a little bit about identity. I mean, if you've listened to us for any amount of time, you would know that we kind of are a little bit passionate about identity. It's kind of what part of what we're called to. So Josh, you want to kick this off?
Yeah. So we had a conversation a while back with some friends about identity and finding your purpose in your identity versus finding your identity in your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a subtle difference, but it's a big difference because it shows the source. And that's another thing, if you've listened to us, we talk about all the time, is the source of where it comes from. What's the source? Because I think the source, the fruit changes depending on what the source is.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's kind of just a subtle difference, but it's the concept of, am I getting my identity based on the things that I'm doing? Which is kind of a unconscious, you're just flowing through life. I got this job, I have this family, we have this community. These things become my identity. And not that they're not attached to it in a correct way either, but sometimes that is just an unconscious pattern that becomes your identity, versus the concept of what I do flows out of who I am.
Right.
And that really changes things, because maybe out of who you are, maybe you are a mother or a father, so you have this family. Maybe you are a community person, so you have this community. Some of the things could look the same, but the source is different. And that's something we're passionate about, is even if it looks similar, the source needs to be correct, or it doesn't lead to life, it leads to death. And just one of the things that's immediately coming to mind in that is, I've seen and heard and talked to people who, they get married and they have kids, and their whole identity becomes raising these kids. And then the kids move out, and all of a sudden they don't know who they are. They don't know what they need to do, because their whole life has been taking care of these kids. And it's devastating sometimes to the person individually. It can be devastating to the marriage, because that was their whole identity. And I think that can be that's hard to see, because what if, to some degree, their identity was being a mother or father and raising these kids, but if they had only shifted their perspective, their identity in this, to where raising this family flowed out of their identity rather than was their identity, then when the kids move out of the house and it's only the husband and wife again, then it's not, I mean, maybe you're sad that your kids are gone, sure, like that's fine, that's understandable, but it doesn't destroy your identity, because that was just something that flowed out of your identity. And you will continue to be a father or a mother and you'll continue to do all these things because it just flows out of who you are. And so I think that is it's a nuanced difference, but where the source of it is makes all the difference in the world.
I would agree. I tend to think, just as you're explaining that, I'm a visual kind of person. This is how I process things. Visually in my mind, what I'm seeing is like funnels. So you have your identity and it gets poured into a funnel, which then the flow that comes out is it gets funneled into your purpose, right? As opposed to having a purpose that gets funneled into, okay, now that defines my identity. It's just a little bit different, but on a grand scale, it can really change the way that things function. And, when we were praying about what to talk about on this episode, I was really led to identity too. We got it separately. We talk about this too. We often do this. We just ask the Lord, like, what do you want us to talk about? Okay, we'll talk about it. And today we both got identity. And the title that I got was Round Hole Square Peg, right? We've all heard this, I don't know, whatever this word play is that people talk about not fitting in somewhere, not like plugging into the right place. I think sometimes what we tend to do is we put the purpose before the identity, or we put our own definitions on our identity, and we try to fit into the square peg. Essentially, we build around, or we build the square peg and then try to fit into the round hole, which is the purpose, right? So if we're building our identity, a lot of times we wind up feeling like we don't quite fit, like things don't quite mesh or line up quite right. And I know this has happened in my own life. I've only been on this like, I don't know, identity, kind of like the engaging heaven, if you want to call it mystical, whatever, this journey for maybe like 6 or 7 years. But before that, I never really felt like I fit in. Like I was always, it wasn't some big horrible thing for me. I wasn't depressed about it or anything. I just, you just kind of don't quite fit. Like there's just something that doesn't quite fit. And I always chalked it up, oh, I'm just unique. I'm just different than other people, whatever. So I do personality tests and I get my definition of who I am from there. And I look at society around me and I decide, well, this is how I fit into this little category. And I've picked up these things all along throughout my life, even starting as a kid, going into teenager and to college age and young adult, young parent, all these different things. I've picked up these different pieces of who I've decided I am. So I spent 30 years, honestly, building the identity that I thought I was without ever asking the one who created me who I am. And I think that's really the piece of the round hole in the square peg. If we can just ask our creator about who we are, then we can be the round hole or the round peg that fits in the round hole, or we can be the square peg that fits in the square hole, right? But when we walk around and we try to build it ourselves, it's just really a shadow of the whole piece. It's not like you can't get part of it, because some of it, it's innate and you know that this is who you are, right? But there are also big pieces that you may be missing because it may be a reflection of him and it may be a part of his characteristic that he's given to you. And if you don't take the time to know him, you won't recognize it. Does that make sense at all? So I think it's really important. And I know that, okay, just based on what I was telling you about myself, I mean, I never really felt like I fit somewhere, right? Like I just didn't quite fit a mold. And I still get that sometimes. Sometimes I still go into systems. I'm there now. I was just at a conference this weekend and I was in this paradigm where I just don't quite fit the mold. And it's not because I look different or because I act different, but the purpose is different. because I know who I am, some of the things that were taught or shared don't quite fit how I know I'm made to operate. But now I can feel okay about that and not feel like some little like lost island out in the middle of the ocean that no one will ever find or know of. You know what I mean? And so there's some solidity and there's some foundational things there that really get you rooted in who you are and take away the like, well, I'll never fit in. I'm just this person floating out that I can't relate with anyone. Well, once you find out that you are uniquely made and that those pieces of the unique bits of the Father that he's put in you are exactly the things that the world needs, it completely can shift a whole it can shift a whole paradigm. It can shift the whole kingdom if people can just get into this place where you can actually seek the creator, actually look to him to say who you are. And let me tell you, I've wrestled with this. I'm speaking from experience. There were even spiritually parts of who I was that I took, and this was actually a conversation with Yeshua. I was just like with him one day and just like, oh, who do you say I am? And he said, well, who do you say you are? Who do you think I say you are? So I told him. And one of the things was I was like, oh, well, I know I'm a prophet. And he's like, you're not a prophet. I was like, yes, I am. You know, that way, like where everything's being questioned, you're like, hang on, don't rip that out from under me. He was like, no, you're not. And I was coming from this place of trying to fit into a paradigm that is in the world that says, if you function this way, you are this. So I was someone who always in my prayer life, I've just been better at listening than I have been at talking. Well, that's kind of my real life too. And so people in the church would say, well, you hear from God, so you're a prophet. And so I took that on as my identity. And then when I take it to the Lord, he goes, you're not a prophet. You can be prophetic without being a prophet. And he said, no, you're an apostle. And I'm like, I'm a what? I don't know what that is. And yes, this is how I talk to the Lord sometimes. It's the relationship I have. It's a unique one and it is personal. But there have been really hard times like that and it feels like a rug pull. It's like this thing that I feel like I'm finally solid on. Oh, I've been affirmed in this. Other people in this earth have affirmed me in this identity that I have built for myself. And the Lord says, no, it's actually this. And then when I let go of that thing that I've been holding on to because it felt like it fit, or I wanted it to fit, or it was a definition that I just longed for, like I just needed something defined. Once I let go of that and allowed what he says about me to kind of take root, then things start opening up. Then purpose starts flowing out of that. That's what's wild. So once you can get the identity piece, then purpose starts flowing out of it. And it is far easier than trying to fit that square peg into a round hole. It's not like you can't get a couple corners in. You can. I bet you've all tried it. I've tried it. You can get a couple corners in and it'll kind of stay there. But it doesn't quite fit. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, that's good. Like it's not that you can't kind of force it a little bit and operate in that a little bit, but the more you become in tune with who you are and you become one with yourself, the more you're going to realize, man, it's just not quite there. Something's just not quite there with this. Mm-hmm. And I think those are important things to pay attention to. The subtle energies of what you're doing, it's important to pay attention to. I think I was having a conversation with who I call my wizard, and you can find an episode we did with him. It's called The Wizard of Aha. But I was having a conversation with him over what I do, and he was talking about he was just asking very pointed questions. What do you do? Why do you do it? And, just very pointed questions in these things. And I was like, really? And it wasn't hypothetical. He was waiting for a response. And so we're having this discourse, and he's like, well, are you doing it because you're passionate about it? Are you doing it because you're good at it? And it was really like I was feeling my identity being poked at, because I was like, and why do I do the things that I do? Is it just an unconscious pattern and I've been doing this? Or is it like, no, this is who I am. This is who I was created to be. And this is how that gets outworked in the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so he told me, like, okay, imagine a Venn diagram. And on one side, you have the things that you're passionate about. And on the other side, you have the things that you're skilled about. Where those overlap, that is generally a really good place to start in what you do. And so I was thinking about it, and I was like, okay, like, is that true for me? And playing with this. I and then I was thinking, well, how do you find your identity? Like, what do you do that helps you find your identity? And Kim and I have talked about this too, is an episode called Desires of Your Wild Heart. Um, but I truly believe that the desires that are in your heart for what you want to do, that God put those there,
Mm.
that He put them there. And those are also His desires. And I think you have to boil it down. So if you were to say, okay, what's the desire of your heart? And you said, well, I want to have $1 million. Okay, well, boil that down. Why do you want to have $1 million? Well, because I want to provide for my family. Okay, well, why do you want to provide for your family? Like, boil it down and boil it down until you get to the root. Maybe you want to help finance the entertainment industry for the kingdom of God. Well, why do you want to do that? Boil it down to the root, because on the surface you'll get a lot of soul.
Mm.
Like, oh, I want to have a nice car, and none of that's wrong. I'm not saying any of it's wrong. But if you boil it down to the root of what it is, I think there you will find the desire that God placed in your heart. And there you can find things you're passionate about. And then you can look for, okay, out of those things that I'm passionate about, where do I actually have skill? And you can gain skill. Skill is acquired. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, start with where you are. Start with the skills you do have, and then wisdom and understanding and education and all these things can come alongside you, and you can start to envelop more of the things you're passionate about. That Venn diagram can start to merge, and more of the things that you're passionate about can become things you're also skilled at. But I think that if you're struggling with what is my identity, start with the things you're passionate about. Start with the desires of your heart. What would you like to see in the earth? And then spend some time and boil it down to the exact reason at the very core of you why you believe that.
Mm.
And I think there you will find some really good truth about who you are, about why you were created, and about what to do about it.
I think that's really good. And I also have to say this because I feel like I don't know, I could be leading this in a way that I don't want to, this conversation. I don't think that even when the Lord tells you, oh, you're not this, like He told me, oh, you're not a prophet. That doesn't mean that I never can step into that if it's needed in a certain situation. It means that that's not like at the core of how I was made to operate. That's not what is going to be completely flowing out of me most of the time, right? And I think
Mhm.
it's really good. I love this concept of the desires of your heart, because the more time we go on, the more we dig into this, the more we find He placed those desires there
Yeah.
to help you want to step into who He's made you to be. It's not because He wants to bend to your will. It's because He's made you this way, right? There are these things that you desire that he's placed there so that you will more easily step into who you were made to be. And so it does come naturally. Some of it doesn't. Sometimes there are traumas that just knock us off course, and it just happens. Everybody has trauma. Like every trauma is unique, except that every person has trauma. It just looks different in each person. And a lot of the times I have found I don't love to give the enemy credit for much of anything. Honestly, I'm not even going to talk about the enemy, but sometimes the things that you get attacked with the most, and the way in which you get attacked the most, typically have to do with what you are made to be strongest in. So often your identity gets attacked in the way that you're going to be the strongest. For me, I told you, I always felt like I never quite fit. Like, I don't know who I am. Like, I don't look like anybody else. It makes you really kind of like this lone wolf feeling. I was never without anyone, but you just kind of don't feel like anyone. And guess what? One of my biggest purposes is to help people find their identities. So then I couldn't find my identity. So that then people would look at me and go, you don't even know your identity. How could you possibly help me find mine? Except that once you recognize it, once you can open yourself to hear the voice of the truth in that, it's a lot easier to then distinguish those other voices that may be this little tiny whisper that says, no, you're not. You're not that. You'll never be that. You can't be that. Right? But then you can start recognizing, hey, that's not the voice that tells me the truth. And I know what truth is, And sometimes I think even just that is the first step in the right direction, like differentiating those voices. Can you hear the voice of truth and recognize it? You will. I guarantee you will. When you hear it, you'll know it. It might break you a lot. I'm just going to tell you, it might break you. Identity is not always easy. It might break you because you've built up this thing and you've believed lies about yourself for so long, because that little whisper has always told you these things. And you think that it's just this innate flaw in you. And then the truth goes, I don't make flawed things. No, this is what you're made to do. This is who you are. This is who I say you are. I am, and I say you are. Right? That's the voice of truth. So anyway, I wanted to put that out there. I really think there are these voices that you really have to kind of learn to distinguish. And that little whisper tries to sound like yourself. Honestly, a lot of times it will sound like yourself. It wants to sound like it's valid, but when it comes up against truth, it has nothing to stand on.
So good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up today. I'm getting Josh off of this podcast 5 minutes late, and I'm really sorry about that.
So good. It was a great episode. I loved it.
I appreciate you all listening. We'll see you again next time.
Thank you for sticking around. Listen for new episodes every Monday and Thursday. Find us on all social media platforms by searching for Market Mystics. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. Visit upperroomcd.com, where you can find more information about the hosts, projects, and guests. Go deeper by booking a coaching appointment focused on redefining identity and wealth in your life. See you next time.